Dream Machine. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Patricia.
Hey Patricia, are you in the fighting mood today?
Yes, I am very much so in the fighting mood. I am really looking forward to today's episode.
Yeah, I have to say, this is probably, there's very rare times, I think, we can say that sequels have been good. I mean, we can go across Toy Story 2, Halo 2, I'm just thinking of other twos that we can probably think of.
Mega Man 2,
yeah.
Uncharted 2.
Mm-hmm. And so, this is another special 2 that we're going to be talking about today. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. So after the success of Kung Fu Panda, it was only natural that Kung Fu Panda 2 was going to follow, and it's the 2011 3D computer-animated comedy drama martial arts film directed by Jennifer Yu Nelson and produced by DreamWorks Animation, and also distributed by Paramount Pictures. And I have to say, this again is one of my favorite sequels to a movie.
Yeah, me too. It is hands down so much better than the original. Not to say that the original was bad, it wasn't. But very similar to like Toy Story or Shrek, everything that was good about the first movie, they did it so much better in the sequel.
Yeah. Well, I think I like Kung Fu Panda as an origin story. I think
sure.
This being a follow-up story and starting to develop the character. I think this one I think does it in all the best ways. I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, very similar to how, Toy Story and Shrek have been seen nowadays as origin stories because now they would have like more sequels. And, this is definitely a great progression. It's kind of difficult about, which one is the best out of the three most well-known sequels in DreamWorks. Is it Shrek 2, Kung Fu Panda 2, or How to Train Your Dragon 2, which we'll be discussing about later on. So, I remember when I first, as mentioned in the Kung Fu Panda episode, that when I first heard about the name Kung Fu Panda, I thought it was kind of like ridiculous and dumb. And then eventually I did see it and I thought it was really good. But then when I saw the sequel, I was like blown away by just how serious that they were able to turn this concept. Like the first one had a bit of a comedy feel to it with a bit of drama, especially with with the villain. But here it's like cranked up to 11 with Poe's backstory and the villain's motivation. It's amazing.
Yeah, it sounded like they had this kind of like planned from the beginning. Like they wanted to give us it's still a comical Poe, but they wanted to give us kind of like a serious nature around what was going on as well. So I would say that this environment that he's going into is far harsher than what he originally dealt with in the original film. So I guess we should go into the story. It's narrated at the beginning, and they're doing like puppet style animation of ancient China. And apparently, there's a peacock clan that ruled Gongman City, brought happiness to the land and the creation of fireworks until their son Lord Shen harnessed its destructive potential as a weapon that could rule the entire country. When he learns of the court's goat soothsayer, that a warrior of black and white would one day stop him from going down this dark path, Shen had an entire village of pandas killed to avert it. Shen's parents were horrified at this atrocity and exiled Shen from Gongman City, who later swore revenge. Cut to 20 years later, where we have Poe, and we get this awesome sequence.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, Poe has definitely gone really far from the first movie, in which, he kind of like overworked himself and he was overwhelmed with the kung fu ways. But right here, we can truly see that he has definitely become the Dragon Warrior. We can definitely see about how his teachings have took him this far into progression of embracing that title.
Mm-hmm. So we get this awesome Kung Fu sequence with wolves and also the Furious Five taking on these guys, and then it all comes to a halt when Poe finds a symbol on the wolf boss's armor, which makes him flash back to his mother. And
and this was actually really surprising because Poe, let's be honest. I mean, anybody who's seen the movie, even if you're a young kid, you probably know that his father is, his father who's a goose is not his real father. So it kind of makes you question about like, okay, who's his real parents? And it kind of, brings into question about like, Poe's origin story, very similar to how, when we found out that Goku was an alien in Dragon Ball Z, or, with Superman, he was raised by Ma and Pa Kent in Smallville, and various things. But, here, I think it's very interesting that, he was like brought in as a small baby with, his father raising up to be a noodle salesman. And then the moment that he sees like a symbol, it kind of like flashes back into something that he didn't even realize what it was. It was part of his childhood that he kind of like blotted out of his mind.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, actually, that'd be an interesting conversation. Which character do you think you've ever seen, like in TV or cinema, where you learn something about their backstory and it totally changes what not changes, but like it's a massive surprise to you? Like it's something that you never expected.
I think that's really tough. There are a lot of them, but I think maybe Prince Zuko from Avatar, in which like he's so determined to catch the Avatar, and you're wondering why, and then you find out in a backstory about how, he offhandedly spoke to a general about that they were going to send fresh troops to just to make a diversion of the village so that the earthbenders can kill them, and then the real soldiers would go behind their back. And then he was brought in to challenge for an Agni Kai, and then it was the Fire Lord's, Zuko's father, who was the one who had to, he had to fight, and then he got the scar and he was banished, and it gave a much more real explanation on why he is the way he is. And I think with Poe, with him being like this goofball in the first movie, and then he kind of goes into like this reflective moment about his own past that he doesn't really know anything about it. And and it's not until the third movie when he realizes that he's not he's not the goose's father. And it kind of like that moment actually kind of makes me laugh. It's like with Rocko's Modern Life, in which when Rocco is invited over to dinner from Heifer and his family, and then he finds out that Heifer's family is a bunch of wolves. And then when Rocco just offhandedly says, "Oh, in all the years that I've known him, I didn't know he was adopted," and Heifer didn't even know that he was adopted, and he's like, "Is this true? I'm adopted?" And then they were like, "Yes, you are." And it kind of like this would be like the starting point of Poe learning more about his backstory in Kung Fu Panda 3.
Yeah, I guess mine, if I had to pick one, the one that stands out for me at the moment is when Leela from Futurama found out that she was a mutant and not an alien.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite like, oh wow, like that was that. Like it was. Yeah, that kind of like it kind of changed. We've gone through seasons of Futurama thinking she was this alien from somewhere, and we're going to find out who, from distant planet, like who her origins were. And remember there was that episode when we thought we finally found out what it was, and then you found out the whole thing was a scam.
Yeah,
yeah. And then when that hit, it was like, oh wow, like I never thought of that at all. And also on top of that, the mutant aspect had been introduced quite earlier in the seasons as well.
It has been. If you watch the episodes of Futurama, you can kind of like glance through some parts of it, and it heavily is hinted at about Leela's origins. Very similar to how it's hinted at slightly about, how did Fry get into the cryogenic chamber? He didn't just fall in by accident. Nibbler actually pushed him in.
Yeah,
because it was fulfilling some sort of prophecy.
Yeah, no, it's changed quite a few times, wasn't it? Actually, because
yeah, exactly. The continuity is crazy.
Yeah, but anyway, going back to Kung Fu Panda, and so Poe asks his father, Mr. Ping, where he came from, and all Ping can tell him is that he found Poe as an infant in a radish crater and adopted him. So, yeah. So in a way,
then that's when he gets into the emotion is like, "You're not my father."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that I'm really glad that Mr. Ping was very honest with Poe, telling him where he came from. I mean, he could have just flat out lied, like pretty much, like in the Country Bears the movie.
Oh yeah.
When the bear asks his parents, is like, "Mom, am I adopted?" And they're like, "Of course not." It's like, dude, you're a bear with humans. What do you think? You weren't born with a hairy condition.
You're not my son. bear.
So I'm glad that they were being honest with it, you know. But
Yeah.
anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
So, yeah, I just think the whole conflict with Poe, and on top of that as well, like, do you remember? I'm trying to remember. Did the remake of King Kong come before or after Kung Fu Panda 2?
It came out after. It was 2005.
Yeah, so because there was, remember when Jack Black was in that movie, and everyone's kind of looking at him thinking this guy can't be a serious actor.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I don't know.
It's like, oh, what are you doing here in King Kong? Go back to Tenacious D.
Yeah, it's like, but in Kung Fu Panda, you can sympathize with Poe, and Jack Black in his acting, replaced that very well. And
yeah, he did.
I think this was his redemption, if anything. Yeah, I get it. It's a DreamWorks animation film that he's doing this in, but at the end of the day, like with the emotions that Poe was going through in regards to like finding out who he actually is. And finding out his origins, and going through this journey, and going through this kind of helplessness of not knowing where he actually stands in life. And him being, even questioning himself about being the Dragon Warrior is, the fact that it challenges his faith in being the Dragon Warrior also in all of this. Like, Jack Black portrays that incredibly well.
Yeah, and I don't know when. I think the movie came out like a year after or a few years after, but Jack Black was in an independent film called Bernie, in which it's the story about a nice Christian man. He's like the nicest guy in the world, and he interacts with this old lady all the time, and they see them together and it's very sweet, and then all of a sudden the old lady disappears, like nobody knows what happened, and he kind of disappears too, until it found out that the old lady has been dead for months. And then they think that, oh, because, Bernie was with, this old woman all the time, he must be the murderer. But he comes across as being such a nice guy. He's so unassuming that nobody suspects of him being the murderer. But there's no other witnesses, and there's nobody else who was with this old woman. And then it found out that, hey, shock, surprise, he was the murderer. But he just comes across as such a nice Christian man. And it's like, it's so unassuming that, this guy would be a murderer. And Jack Black plays him amazingly. He plays across as like this really nice guy. And you would never believe that he would do something so horrible.
Yeah, Patricia, but that's an indie film. Who watches them, right? Yeah.
Don't give me that. Come on.
Well, that's the attitude I seem to come across with some moviegoers, unfortunately. So, yeah, if you watch independent films, good on you, because you're like a lot of great indie films came out into massive franchises as well. Like would you believe that the Terminator was an independent film, for crying out loud?
Yeah, and so was Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween, a lot of people seem to forget, was a low budget indie film.
Mm-hmm. And I think I don't sure did Evil Dead count as an independent film? Because
yes, it did, because it was really low budget and they only had very limited resources. So yes, it does come
because they made another movie before that to kind of finance this thing. So
exactly.
Okay, then I guess because I don't know if it was like a major studio then got involved after.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, for a lot of people, they seem to kind of like there's like a difference between indie and independent. It's like indie films is like really low budget, not well known actors, and with independent, it's like, okay, you have maybe like $1 million and maybe like one or two celebrities that some people would know to get people interested in watching. There's a really great Homestar Runner Strong Bad email episode about like the differences between indie and independent films that I highly recommend that you watch, because it is spot on about the difference between indie and independent films. But going into Jack Black's performance, I think that somebody like Poe, who is going through something of an existential crisis, because he's learning more about his backstory, because he has doubts about him being the Dragon Warrior, and because you have this much more threatening villain who wants to kill all the pandas because he wants to fulfill this huge prophecy. It's like there's a lot at stake going into him, and he kind of like goes into like this Zen mode in a way. Like he's trying to like connect himself further into being like the Dragon Warrior that it was kind of like hinted that he could possibly do in the first movie, but now we see it firsthand.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like he's becoming like I wouldn't say the Avatar, I think, of this world.
Not really. I mean, No, no, I mean, like, the Avatar is a bit of a different story because, he gets reincarnated every so often, and, it's a different element, and each one of them has their own distinct personalities
Yeah,
and
but
their own traits.
wasn't there other Dragon Warriors before Poe was? I thought.
Yes, there is, but we don't really know much about them, to be quite honest.
Well, the Kung Fu Panda,
Like,
Kung Fu Panda 4. So,
yeah, yeah, that'd be interesting. Kung Fu Panda 4, we talk about a different dragon warrior. That'd be awesome.
yeah. Well, it won't be a panda no more, would it? Or would it?
Uh,
That's a good
I
question,
I don't
actually.
know. That's a good question. Yeah, would it be a different animal? Because remember, in the first movie, it was hinted that Tigress was going to be the dragon warrior. So, who knows? I mean, I know that Kung Fu Panda they have a new animated series again. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting to know about where the franchise is going to go after this. So
Yeah.
maybe it could be Kung Fu Crane, Kung Fu Tiger. I don't know.
Kung Fu
Your
Meerkat.
guys is- Sure, Kung Fu Meerkat. Timon is a badass. Yes.
Simple as. But anyway, so yeah, just going into that, I think that's Jack Black's. No, that's my favorite performance. I think as Poe
Yes.
in this film, and so I mean, though, mind you, with all of that going on, the Furious Five. I mean, Tigress obviously gets her supporting role in as confronting Poe and about the distractions that he's having in that. But I mean, the other ones are kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Tigress is definitely the one that stands out the most out of the Furious Five. The other characters, I mean, they're not bad, but they just don't really contribute that much because there's just so many things that are going on. There's many other characters that are featured in that the Five kind of get lost in the shuffle. I mean, the villain is hands down. I think this is the best villain that we've seen in a while.
Yeah,
In
I
terms,
love the villain. I think that the fact that he is basically a giant machete. He's just this. He's got all these sharp objects around him, and like everything like that. He is a very menacing and even to the touch villain. It's brilliant watching him.
Yeah, and you can tell that he is threatening. Like the last villain, he was threatening, but at the same time, he felt like he was missing something. Like he didn't know what the essence was of being a dragon warrior. But this guy, he utilizes his weaponry and his knowledge of fireworks and cannons to his advantage. Like he is so determined to fulfill the prophecy of killing off the panda so that he can be able to take over. I feel like this is the prophecy from Hercules done right,
Yeah.
in which, like, Hades decides to send Pain and Panic to kill off Hercules, and then he thinks that, oh, I'm perfectly fine. But it's like, no, he decides to go from village to village and kill off everything just so that they can be able to not fulfill the prophecy. It's very similar to, like, Avatar, in which, like, all of the Fire Lords from previous generations, before Avatar, Ozai had decided to, kill off all of the airbenders so that the Avatar will never reincarnate, and they succeeded for 100 years.
Yeah.
So this is a smart villain.
The great thing about, I mean, I love the villains in Kung Fu Panda, like just the
Yeah, I
series.
do too. It's just that I think this one's just the best one.
Yeah, this is the best one, but I mean, don't you feel like none of the villains in Kung Fu Panda are that like throwaway villains? Like everyone has like their own menacing look to them. Everyone has like their own threat to them and everything.
Sure.
So I mean, dare I say the Incredibles? I mean, like besides Syndrome, I mean, the Underminer and some of the other villains that appear in Bon Voyage, they're kind of throwaway villains, aren't they?
Yeah,
When you
and
think about 'em.
Screenslaver, let's be honest. I mean, nobody remembers Screenslaver.
No one's gonna remember Screenslaver. They'll remember what's her face. I don't even remember what what's her face is now, but he's gone out right now. But yeah, we don't even remember that person either, so forget that. But yeah, I mean, if I had to compare the villains to Kung Fu Pandas, the villains of the Incredibles, I'd take the Kung Fu Panda villains any day of the
Yeah,
week.
definitely, absolutely. So, I think that one of the things that, kind of like is great about the villain is that he's also really hilarious. He has that great balance of being hilarious yet being really threatening. And he has some really funny scenes, and he also has scenes that come across as like very sinister. And I mean, when the scene in which when Shen kills the rhino. I mean, that's like he's willing to stop nothing to get his goals achieved. That just goes to show you just how threatening he is.
Yeah. Did you know the sad thing about it is it's like it feels like they've been kind of building this villain up for not in like the movies, but like in like the series of DreamWorks productions that they've done. Like Robert De Niro in Shark Tale, he should have been that villain. Like, a mixture of being like really, he's a giant shark who's a mob boss, and like he should have been like he should have been a really threatening villain in the DreamWorks franchises. But no.
Like he was a mafia boss. Like, come on,
who's a shark? Like, it reminds me of like the shark out of Fish Police when he was like that shark lawyer, and like he was like a more menacing version of that. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be cool, but it wasn't. Like,
yeah. I mean, DreamWorks villains seem to be like kind of hit and miss. It's like you have amazing villains such as General Mandible from Ants, or Ramesses from Prince of Egypt, or Lord Farquaad and the Fairy Godmother from the Shrek franchise. And then you just have like blasé villains. Like we just talked about Megamind and Titan from Megamind, and just a lot. It could be hit and miss. It's like some of them are really memorable, and others are just like they're not worth talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of like that meme that goes around with that little star on that says "You tried." Like you get a mixture of like you get like really cool villains, and then you get villains that just try. Like yeah, villain, you tried.
Yeah, sure. You get a gold star.
Yeah, good for you. Like,
yeah, I mean, maybe we'll put your achievements in the refrigerator, then we'll take them down like a week later.
Yeah. So, what do we think of the final fight scene?
Oh my god, it's incredible.
Yeah, I love how it starts. Whereas, like, that joke I always make of like, when heroes like a far. I remember that, like in Monsters University when Mike Wazowski is like on top of a car yelling at the dean, and like she's like massively far away at the back of the crowd, yet somehow he can still hear him.
Yeah,
but like in this, like they actually get they actually get what would happen actually right. So Poe is there, monologuing to the villain, and the villain can't hear because he's so far away.
Yeah, exactly. And they try this joke again in Shrek Forever After, in which like they're outside, the ogres are outside trying to plan to get back inside so they can save Shrek and Fiona, and then the witchers are like, "Hey, you're talking too loud." And, I guess this is just a joke that is done better because it's like there's a lot of monologuing and like, these epic climactic battles. And then they're just trying to play it off as like, hey, I can't hear you. What? What did you say?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty funny.
I just think that was awesome. And so, they rescue the Furious Five, and then they have this kick-ass scene, which I think is really awesome. And they defeat the cannon, and that's pretty much the story. This is the thing, like, it's such a simple story, yet it's still pretty awesome at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that everything is executed like really, really well. Like the stakes have gotten a lot higher. Poe has started to develop more as the Dragon Warrior. The villain is awesome, and and just the threat is really high because they're dealing with cannons and fireworks. So
well, the great thing about it is that you care about everything that's happening in this film. I think this is one of the very few DreamWorks films where we haven't looked at a story arc and thought, who cares? Like
exactly.
Yeah. So I think Kung Fu Panda 2 is executed brilliantly, and characters are great, music's great too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a reason why a lot of people call this not only, one of the best in DreamWorks' lineup, but one of the best sequels ever made. It's like it's basically become like the standard in terms of like taking everything that was good about the first movie and making it even better. It has been up there with the likes of Toy Story 2 and Shrek 2 in terms of like movies that are so much better than the original, and they get the praise that they deserve, and there's a reason why people still fondly remember it.
Mm-hmm. So the cast, Jack Black and Angelina Jolie as Poe and Tigress, they do very well in this, and so does Dustin Hoffman as Master Shifu. He does brilliantly too, and Jackie Chan as Monkey as well, and Lucy Liu, and Seth Rogen as Mantis was quite surprising as well. And,
and it's kind of funny that Seth Rogen was in this movie, I think it was like around the same time when he was trying to like pitch Sausage Party.
Yeah.
It was like around that same time they were trying to do Sausage Party, saying like, hey, I want to make a movie that, the first rated R CGI movie. So It's like, kind of crazy that, while he was doing that, he was trying to see if Sausage Party could become a reality, and it didn't happen until like
Yeah.
10 years later.
I'm trying to remember. Were there any Kung Fu Panda skits for Robot Chicken? Around about the
Maybe
same
there
time?
is. I
Maybe
have
there
I
are.
haven't caught up. I mean, maybe there has been. There's been so many Robot Chicken skits. I haven't caught up with it, but I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised.
usually when Seth Rogen's is floating within a certain direction, usually they end up in Robot Chicken sketches. So yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah. Oh, by the way, when Master Croc came on screen and it was Jim Claude Van Damme, that was quite surprising for me. Like,
Yeah, I mean, Jean-Claude Van Damme was like really popular in the '90s. It's like what it was kind of a surprise that he was in a Kung Fu Panda movie.
well, wasn't
I
it
mean,
at
I'm
that
not too
time
surprised.
wasn't that at the time he was making kind of a comeback because then I think around about the same time he appeared in The Expendables too.
Oh,
So
that's right. Now you're right. Yeah, so this was his comeback era, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it
So,
was. But I was
so I
very
guess if
I was very surprised that they gave him like because remember when Sylvester Stallone did Ants and he was like the soldier
yeah,
character.
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and like we thought, like, well, it was, you had to kind of like listen very carefully to like where he was trying to get his lines out and everything, and
Sure.
like so, yeah, it was very surprised that they turned around to Jim Claude Van Damme and said, oh, hey, we want to give you a speaking role because sometimes when I look at Jim Claude Van Damme, sometimes you have to kind of like I'm glad his lips are moving so I can put a face to a voice in that regard, but that's just me, but.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, that's so the characters were brilliant, I thought,
Mm-hmm.
and so do we dare go for all the awards and nominations that this
Oh,
thing got?
jeez. This thing got so many awards, but it lost at the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and it lost to Rango of all films. Now,
Uh,
and
well,
here's the
there's
thing,
a
Rango has been given a bit of a bit of a debate nowadays because um a lot of people felt that it was just not as that Kung Fu Panda was better, but I thought that Rango was good. I liked it just fine. It was very interesting about like trying to give a western and a bit of an edge, especially this since it was done by Nickelodeon Movies. And this would be, I believe, it would be Rango and Tintin like around the 2010s. That those would be the two movies that would win Oscars for Best Animated Feature.
Yeah, I mean, the Tintin didn't surprise me too much. That movie was awesome. I saw that in 3D and I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, I
And
wish I would have saw it in 3D.
oh, 3D was brilliant, and for Tintin, and also, I mean, Rango. I've seen Rango, and I tell you what, it's actually one of the very few Nickelodeon movies I actually love. I'll be
Yeah,
honest with you.
I do love it as well. Like
Oh,
Nickelodeon movies are a bit hit and miss. I mean,
a bit.
okay, they're very hit and miss. A lot of them suck. And I'm not talking about. I'm also including the live action stuff as well. But
I was gonna say
yeah,
because when I saw Rango, I thought the minute that movie ended, I thought, wow, they've come leaps and bounds since Good Burger. Like,
Good Burger. Okay, I thought I haven't seen anything that I mean, I like SpongeBob SquarePants as well, but in terms of like that, I mean, it's like the Rugrats in Paris and Jimmy Neutron, and the SpongeBob SquarePants movies. Those are the ones that I do kind of like and would rewatch and kind of like recommend in terms of like that. But yeah, Rango and Tintin are the two movies that I really want you guys to see if you haven't. But yeah, it's a bit of a. I mean, a lot of people still debate about whether like either Rango or Kung Fu Panda 2 should have won for the Oscars. Very similar to how people debate about like whether
well,
what you call it, like
I guess
Brave should have.
I guess the question would be, what negatives will we put against Rango and Kung Fu Panda 2, and which one do you think would be the worst negative?
See, a
Because
lot of
keep in
people
mind,
felt.
Kung Fu Panda, while it's a really good story, it's still a sequel, so you can't say it's as
Yes, that
original
is
as
true.
Wango.
Exactly. Yeah, that is very true. It's kind of like how people debated that, this year's Oscar, a lot of people thought that Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet was going to win, but it ended up being Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse. But that's still a Spider-Man movie. But, a lot of people said that it deserved to have won. And then there are some people who liked Isle of Dogs more because it was an original story. So it's a bit of a debate about like which one really deserved to have an Oscar win. It's like, oh, what do you prefer, like Brave or Paranorman, or various movies that
I would say in regards to the categories, in regards to, I mean, Isle of Dogs, and I mean, there was all these accusations from liberal Hollywood about cultural appropriation and all this bullshit, and so, and I don't guess I wasn't too surprised that they decided not to, vote in that favor. But then there was, I'm trying to think, what was the other one that was under consideration?
Brave won over Paranorman, and people were really pissed on that.
Yeah, Brave was a missed opportunity. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, well, we already talked about Brave and Pix Mix, so you can go listen to that.
Yeah.
And Paranorman is amazing. I still think it's Leica's best film.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, going back to the awards of Kung Fu Panda 2, like, I mean, it's got like, it had like 9 separate nominations for Annies, and like it won 2 of them, and then it's like got this trophy cabinet of nominations, and it's rightly so as well, by the way. And
yes.
Yeah, it's just surprising that a lot of them, they were just nominations, and surprisingly none of them were actually kind of like, only 2 of them were kind of awards, and that was an Annie for directing in a feature production, and an Annie for production design in a feature production. So its production got a bit of praise, but surprisingly nothing else really. So
that's a shame, because a lot of things about this movie is amazing. Like I really do like the acting in this. The story was great. This movie, is amazing. It definitely one of the best DreamWorks films out there. It's a real shame that it didn't really like accolade into like a lot of awards like it should have. But I think many people have already put it on a pedestal as it is. So I guess that's okay.
Yeah. We've got a bit of trivia for you as well. Some of the promotional titles that were used for Kung Fu Panda 2 include Kung Fu Panda 2, The Kaboom of Doom, and also Kung Fu Panda 2, Pandemonium.
Pandemonium. That would have been funny.
Yeah, those weren't official titles, by the way. They were just used as promotionals. So
I know, but that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, and also Kung Fu Panda is the 3rd DreamWorks animation film to become a franchise after Shrek and Madagascar. And also, along with Puss in Boots, this is the first time that in 2008 that DreamWorks Animation released 2 animated features in the same year.
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast with Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon, this is when DreamWorks was starting to get into its second golden age, where they would release some of the most critically acclaimed and some of their best work that they've ever done until the buyout with Universal and when Jeffrey Katzenberg left. But we'll talk about that later on.
Yep. So, that is pretty much for Kung Fu Panda 2, and as you can both tell, it is our favourite DreamWorks film so far.
Yes, it is. It's very, like I said, I mean, it's hard for me to decide whether Shrek 2 or Kung Fu Panda 2 is the best, but I think that out of everything, Kung Fu Panda 2 is definitely the best one so far.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got plenty more films to go, so who knows, maybe our minds might change at some point, but for me, Aaron.
Yes. And Patricia.
Take care, and bye for now.
See you later.
For now.